Well, meanwhile, at the G7 today, relaunching balanced growth across the world, global tech, as well as shoring up discussions on the main topics of the summit, of course, Ukraine and Iran, all on the agenda on the third and last day of that summit in Evian in the east of France. You can see these images just coming into us of the German Chancellor there, Friedrich Merz, and some of the other leaders beginning to gather for the summit today. It comes, of course, after Donald Trump said that he had a very good meeting yesterday with Volodymyr Zelensky, saying too many young men are dying on the battlefield and that Russia should make a deal. And we're going to stay on the subject of Ukraine, in fact, for today's perspective, because my guest on the programme today is a remarkable woman who's given up her dream job as an investment analyst at Morgan Stanley on Wall Street to return home to her native country of Ukraine to work during the war, initially as a combat medic. Now, Viktoriia Honcharuk was just starting her career when the war broke out. She felt she simply couldn't continue to work as normal in the US when her country needed her, so she went home to join the fight. And this week, she's here in Paris, on the outskirts of Paris, in fact, at the huge defence trade show, Eurosatory. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but she joins us now here in the studio. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. Let's go back in time, first of all. Tell us what happened when the war first broke out, because we saw that image of you there at Morgan Stanley, working so far away from home. I mean, that must have been a very difficult moment for you.
It was. I moved to the US when I was 15, so I was quite young, and I went to high school and then university in the United States. So it was quite difficult to be there when I first heard that Russia launched a full-scale invasion in Ukraine. I tried calling my parents, my sister, who were all in Ukraine at that time, and nobody was picking up, so I didn't know what to think.
Yeah. And what was your thought afterwards once you realised the scale of what was happening? Was it an immediate reaction to think, I've got to go home?
Yeah. Immediate reaction was everything that I was doing before didn't matter as much. I was young. I was building a career in finance on Wall Street, and that felt so important to me when I was young. I felt like there's nothing else that I should be doing but advancing my career. But when I realized that the scale of what Russia is doing, and this is an existential war, that Russia is not going to stop on Ukraine as well, that it's a much larger war for all of us in Europe, I realized that this is the time in history where I have to make tough decisions and where I want to be a part of the resistance of this evil, and that I have to be back home.
So how did you make that decision? I mean, was it almost instantaneous, or did it take you a few days?
It took me some time, because in the beginning of full-scale invasion, everyone was short on supplies, and I was making good money. So first, the helpful thing that I could do was to find those supplies and send them to Ukraine. That's what I was doing for the first couple of months. And when I realized that I think I've exhausted, my resources here, and I don't feel like I'm fully in the fight, and I feel like I have to be, although I had nothing to do with military. I was very skeptical of all, armed conflicts in general. I always thought that things could be solved in a different way. But then I realized that maybe not. Maybe that's something that I have to do for myself and come back and protect what matters to me the most, something that made me, my culture, my language, my history, and nothing else matters as much as making sure that Ukraine stays Ukraine, and that I can have something for the future of their generations. If I have kids, I want to be able to look them in the eyes and say, I have done everything possible to make sure that you guys have a future and that you can speak Ukrainian, that you can have the culture and you can know your history.
So tell us what you were doing initially, Army medic, yes?
That is correct. Most of my time in combat I spent as an Army medic. I had nothing to do with medicine before full-scale invasion. Again, I was in banking, very different. I was afraid of blood. I was afraid of needles. I was a very girly girl before full-scale invasion.
Yeah.
But when I wanted to join the very short of medics, and I said that's something that I can try to do, especially as a young woman. It was quite difficult to just break in some of the combat roles in the beginning of full-scale invasion. So I said, whatever you need me to do, I'll do. And medic was something that they needed. So I braced myself. I learned very quickly what to do. And in like 1.5 weeks after initial training, I was on a battlefield.
So did you brace yourself enough? I mean, what you came across on the battlefield must have been at times pretty horrific.
It was like anything I ever imagined in my life, and hopefully I'll never experience this again. But I think I was very good at separating my brain from everything else, and so my hands were just doing what I needed to do, and then my brain was catching up later the things that I witnessed and that I had to do.
And are you able to separate from it now? I mean, I know you're not a medic on the front line anymore, but presumably those memories will never go away.
That is true, yeah. I did also lose a lot of my close friends. In fact, on Saturday, right before coming here, we had a funeral of two of my closest friends. They were killed 3 years ago, but they were just buried now. Quite difficult. I had to evacuate their bodies as well from the battlefield and had to recognize them. It was like anything I ever imagined humans have to go through in this day and age, and definitely it will haunt me forever, but I know why they made the decision. They were all young people who wanted to stand up for Ukraine. One of the people that we buried on Saturday, he was from Donetsk, a city that's occupied since 2014, and more than anything, he wanted to come back to his home city with a Ukrainian flag and live in Ukraine in his own city. So I know what they fought for, I know the values that they fought for, and I am proud more than anything that I can carry on that mission for them, and that I fight for the same values, for their values, for the values of Ukraine, for the values of all Europe and all Western world.
As you're saying, you're still fighting, but in a different capacity now. Tell us what you're doing now.
That is true. I recently became the head of military-civilian partnerships in technology sector. What that means is, as you know, Ukraine's been advancing so much in technological perspective, especially my own Third Army Corps. So Third Army Corps is a land forces unit in Ukraine. We hold in about 150 kilometers, which is 12% of all of the combat line currently in Ukraine, which is the biggest any corps in Ukraine is holding. And we were able to do this largely because of our technological advancements. Last year, we're quite famous for using unmanned ground vehicles, especially strike unmanned ground vehicles. We were the first ones to assault and take over a position without any infantry involvement. President Zelensky mentioned this recently. We also took 2 prisoners of war using unmanned ground vehicles, and since then we've been doing a lot of assault and support and assaults with strike unmanned ground vehicles. And the goal of our commander, Andrei Beletsky, is also to replace 1/3 of all of the infantry by the end of this year with robots, because we want to save our people. We want to make sure that we can replace some of the jobs that infantry is doing right now with what robots are doing. And so my job is to find partners in the private sector, the companies that are making that technology, and have a more closer and structured partnership with the military, because the military is the end users. We know what we need, and we know what that should look like, and so we need to be the people who tell in the private sector to do so.
I mean, technology has made such a difference in this war, hasn't it? I mean, that seems to be the thing which is really turning the tide. How optimistic are you now for Ukraine, bearing in mind the news that we've been receiving, notably from the front line over the last few months?
Yeah. As you know, the war in Ukraine has now been longer than World War I, for example, so it's been some time, and Russia, as you know, has been losing more and more soldiers per square kilometer, and some of the news were coming out in this with those numbers. But Ukraine is winning in a different way. We're losing less soldiers. We are using less soldiers for some of the very traditional jobs on the front line. So that's what we do. I'm very optimistic in that regard that we'll be able to replace 1/3 of our infantry at the Army Corps with robots. But also, we are very optimistic in some of the other things that we're doing. For example, as you know, spring is quite good time for assaults from both sides, and Russia did try to assault the combat line that we hold in pretty harshly this spring. But again, I'll echo our Corps Commander Andrei Beletsky, who said this is probably a turning point in our operations right now, and we've been using something called middle strikes in our core level to prevent the enemy from even trying to assault, targeting their logistical hubs, targeting their personnel hubs, fuel tankers, anything that supplies the frontline units of Russia so that we can stop them even before they start assaulting our positions.
What would be your message to people? I mean, obviously people are watching this around the world. A lot of people sort of engaged in the fight that Ukraine has, but at the same time, are world leaders doing enough? Are people doing enough? Is there more that can be done by the rest of the world to try and help the fight?
Yeah. I definitely feel the support of people. I travel a lot right now abroad, both in the U.S. and Europe, and I do feel the support of people, which is great when people come and ask questions and express their support. One area that we always try to push more in is learning from Ukraine. I mean, obviously, it's hard to learn when there's no threat coming in, but Ukraine is the most advanced technologically army in the world, and we are probably going to be the push, the most technological army in Europe, and the rest of European countries need to learn the tactics, need to learn the technology. So work with Ukraine, learn from Ukraine, learn with Ukraine, build with Ukraine. We have a lot of those programs, so let's continue working together.
Good to have you on the programme today. Thanks very much for coming in. Viktoriia Honcharuk joining us here on the programme. Back off to the trade show very shortly, I gather. So thanks very much once again for today's perspective.